Two Irish filmmakers who have tackled controversial issues in the past have just made a documentary. Okay, well, Kieran Hickey, you're a geographer, you're a climate scientist, you watched the entire documentary. What's your reaction to it?
Well, I think the documentary has a number of fundamental flaws to it, and I can identify three really which concern me of great concern. Firstly, of course, a lot of the film is about malaria and DDT, which of course has nothing to do with climate change whatsoever. Secondly, of course, the film suggests that the warmer world would be a better world for everybody, and that's clearly not the case. You'll have increased desertification across the globe, you'll have the drying out of many areas, food problems in many areas, which we've already experienced with food riots over the last number of years in many countries. And it fundamentally fails to deal with the vast majority of work that's been carried out on climate change over the last 20 years or so, and it ignores the huge amount of work by thousands of scientists around the globe which carried out studies on many aspects of climate change and in many countries. And I think that's really a fundamental issue with the film. It's more about Al Gore and the mistakes, a small number of mistakes he made in the film itself, and the hockey stick diagram which we've all discredited at this stage as climate scientists.
Okay, Fionn McAleer, I know you made this with Anne McElhenney. For instance, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, it's been going for 20 years. Thousands of scientists from all over the world believe that climate change, global warming, is a certainty. Surely that's just an absolute certainty at this stage.
Well, many people in the IPCC don't agree with that. Their larger report is condensed down to a summary policymaker, was then given a press conference by the head of the IPCC, which becomes an alarmist mantra. I mean, we've had these consensuses before. We've had the consensus. The reason DDT is there, because DDT was the first big environmental consensus, that DDT was going to cause cancer, was going to kill us all, kill the birds. And the result was 50 million women and children died in Africa from a spike in malaria. Because DDT was going to kill us. Now we found out, and the World Health Organization last year, said, sorry, whoops, we made a mistake. 50 million women and children.
Okay, and what about Kieran's point he was just saying, what does that have to do with climate change?
It was a consensus, just like we had a consensus about BSE, we had a consensus about killer bees were going to kill us all. We've had these scares before.
This isn't a scare, this is a fundamental reality. We're dealing with a huge amount of scientific evidence, not just a scare as such. Even the BSE issue, the reason it was resolved and the fatality levels weren't as high was because we took precautionary principles. We took the foods that we're using for cattle out of the feed system. So we made the precautions that changed the issue, and that's what we need to do for climate change. We need to make these precautions now and not just leave them to chance or to happen chance.
But we were told that there was a ticking time bomb inside all our brains, that we've been exposed to the poisoned meat of BSE. It never happened. I mean, so the things like DDT are a perfect example of how we can get ahead of ourselves, how the scientific consensus can coalesce with a media consensus, and the impoverished people on the earth suffer. The poor people.
Let's talk about climate change, because climate change is
well, actually, let's not talk about climate change.
Well, actually, let's talk about climate change, and that is why we are here tonight, because there are two interesting different views.
Let's ask when did it change? Can you tell me, when did it change from global warming to climate change? I know when it changed from the new ice age. When I was at school, we had a geography teacher, Mr. Lenihan, just out of college, and he told us we were entering a new ice age in the 70s. Then we were entering the global warming, and then
okay, let's hear Hickey answer that, Ben.
Well, it's very simple. When we started to investigate the issue of the possibility that we're entering into a cooler phase, we actually realised that that was not the case at all, that the fundamental trends over the longer time period actually were to a rising temperature, and we started to identify clearly why that occurred in the case.
Okay, can I just say, Kieran, give us three, for our viewers, you gave them to me earlier when I was just talking to you, three absolute facts why you are certain that climate change is a certainty, and then I'll let you back in town.
Well, global temperature has risen 0.2 degrees centigrade every decade since 1980. In Ireland, it's actually 0.4 degrees centigrade.
Briefly, now don't get too technical, I'll lose my viewer.
Sea level rise is rising at a faster rate, and certainly since 1990, sea level has increased significantly, and that's a huge issue for Ireland because we're a small coastal country. And also, there's been precipitation changes, and we're soon to see significant increases in flooding.
Okay, fair enough.
But Kieran must know that in the last 13 years, it has not warmed up on the earth. You know that's correct.
If you take each individual year, it does show change, and there's variability as you would expect. So if you look at the underlying trend, you can see clearly that the underlying trend is upwards.
But Kieran, 2 minutes ago, you said in the last every decade since 1980, it's gone up by 0.2. You're now agreeing that in the last 13 years it hasn't warmed at all. I haven't said that at all. The warming trend is there.
you can't compare the decadal figure with the yearly
Let me
annual
ask you something,
variability.
Shailen, for a second. So, I mean, are you saying you believe that the thousands of scientists, for instance, involved in the IPCC are wrong, that the science is wrong, the majority consensual view is wrong, or do you think there's something more sinister going on?
Well, I mean, when we had the big ice age scare, all the political scientists of the day said we need to stop the industrialization, we need to stop burning fossil fuels. Then when they decided it was global warming, they wanted to stop burning fossil fuels and deindustrialize. I think there's a lot of anti-capitalism,
now we're getting to the fundamental issue.
anti-development people behind this global warming hysteria.
That's certainly
They
not the
don't
case.
like industrialization.
We
They don't
do.
like capitalism.
We
They
want
don't
to see
like.
people
They
have-
don't
Okay, let
like
Kieran Hickey come
people
back
of the
on
third world getting
Kieran
developed.
Hickey.
They don't like.
Let Kieran Hickey come
They
back on there,
think, they think that. I mean,
This is not the issue. This is not the issue at
The
all.
science is flawed, and
The science is flawed.
the question is the cure worse than the disease? And let me tell you, for the poor people in the world, the people
Okay.
in China
Fair enough, I
and
need
India
Kieran Hickey to
and
come back
Africa.
in here, to be fair.
I don't think that's the case at all. I think a global warming world will have a far more devastating effect on developing countries as much as developed countries. And there's opportunities here for new economies. The carbon economy, which is currently worth 1.5 billion, is expected to go to 500 billion
Okay, let
by
me ask you a broader
2050.
question, I suppose, Kieran Hickey. Maybe there is a feeling that, I suppose, poor people in even Western countries, right, and the developing countries may end up suffering more than people like us who can, like, exchange our,
Yes, and can
carbon
afford some
credits and
changes in our
stuff.
lifestyle. That's certainly the case, but we can transfer technology. We can use the carbon taxes and the Kyoto Protocol to transfer money from the richer countries to the poor countries who have lower emissions and to compensate for that. So
And then one more point, and I'll leave it. The notion, I suppose, it was in that film, the long version, like environmentalists care more about fish eggs, that's some perception. No, I suppose, than perhaps children and the lives of children. That is a perception, I suppose, out there. That doesn't mean the science is wrong.
no, that's not the case. We all have families, we all have children, we all live in communities. We care enormously about the world, and this is why we've come out with this material and tried to make it public, because we're concerned about the future of the planet and fundamentally the people that live on it.
Okay, and with the greatest respect to you, film, I mean, you're a filmmaker, a documentary maker. I respect them greatly, but you're not a scientist.
Yes,
So for you to come out, I suppose, and try to oppose the consensus of the IPCC with thousands of
But Al
scientists.
Gore is not a scientist. In fact, Al Gore interviews no scientists in An Inconvenient Truth, and he wins a Nobel Prize. Our film has scientists from both sides of the argument. So that's an argument I suppose we should put to Al Gore. I mean, when I was young, white middle-class people from the developed world who told black and brown people what to do in the developing world were called colonialists. Now we give them a white coat or put a woolly jumper
This
on
has
them.
nothing to do with colonialism. This is to do with just
And
fundamental
they're called
global
environmentalists.
environmental
You're
The same as the
interfering.
ozone
Here,
layer.
please
The
let
same
me
as the
finish.
ozone
Please
layer.
Let
let
him
me
finish
finish.
for a second.
You're interfering in the development of people in the developing world. You're interfering in the lives of people, of the poorest people if you
But
work in
then that could be
factories.
true, and still climate change could be a fact. Do you know what I mean? Like, you're almost making two different points.
No, I'm not. I'm saying we've done this before. This is where DDT comes in. We've done this before. We've gone off in a panic. We've taken away a wonderful modern technology
Why
called
did you make the
DDT.
documentary about DDT? It would be far more valid in terms of what I've seen in the documentary itself. I think when it goes into the area of climate change, it becomes very misleading and very flawed. And
Okay,
Well,
listen.
DDT has
This debate will go on, gentlemen. I have to stop it there. I'm really sorry. But look, it's been a very interesting discussion, and hopefully we'll come back to it again. Kieran Hickey, Fiona McAleer, thank you both very much for coming in.